Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at CESJ.org. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I hope your 2019 is awesome. I took a longer break than expected due to having a lot of business-related stuff going on, so I appreciate your patience. Also, thanks to Dawn, Mike, and Norm for their help with the podcast. Today is Dr. King Day, and a good time to think about justice and hear a message from Dr. Norm Kurland. He has some timely thoughts for the new year as we watch dysfunctional government and the corrupt, broken system. Thanks again for listening, and please stay with us because we have some good shows lined up for you. So here is a message from Norm.
Today we're going to talk about the problems of today in the world, but particularly in America, and what can be done to change the system. You know, it's interesting to mention that at the beginning of this year, the editor of the Merriam-Webster dictionary said that the word that is the word of the year for last year was justice, that more people looked for the term justice, what it meant. And we're going to go into that because we're going to discuss how we at the all-volunteer nonprofit Center for Economic and Social Justice today want to talk about what can be done to change the system, given the fact that today there's probably America is more divided than it's been from the beginning of the first American Revolution, of course. And that was a revolution that was a model for the world, except for slavery. But otherwise, in terms of justice, they understood what justice was. And so today we'll talk about, at the beginning of this year, let's see what are the kinds of problems, serious problems, that America is facing and is dividing America. Let's just take the longest furlough in the history of federal government workers. 800,000 workers are now out of work, or they're forced to do things for free, just to make sure that certain things are being done. There were articles, for example, that in some of the federal prisons now there are real problems. Some of the worst prisons are having problems. That's just an example of what happens under the present leadership in America. We have another problem is the crisis of people from other countries who dictatorial countries, unjust countries, they want to come to America for many reasons. But in any event, that becomes a problem as to whether we're going to have a wall or not and spend incredible amounts of money to construct a wall. Is that the answer, or can there be a answer that what we call the just third way? Is there an answer? Or we can look at the extreme concentration of wealth in the United States, where the eighth richest people in the world, frankly, own more than the poorest one half of the global population. In other words, more than 3.6 billion human beings in the world. And the top 1% in America own more than the bottom 90%. Something there should seem unjust to everyone. And then we have the problem of infrastructure. We have our highways not being adequately repaired. Your railroads are not are primitive compared to other countries like China and Japan. Why are we missing that when we have some of the greatest scholars, technical scholars who have the ideas but need to do something. Why do we have that? Is there a way of addressing the needs for new infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructures, so that we can have, for example, a grid that might provide the energy needs, but without the needs for fossil fuels. And we're going to have to answer that. How can we deal with the fossil fuels? And we think that we can offer a solution to that. Then we have the problem of national security, war problems, what's happening in the Middle East. And I don't think we have the correct answer to that today. But obviously, the best way to avoid war is to provide justice for all people, because then they're not going to want to go to war, and you're not going to have the kind of terrorism that you have. You can see China, a dictatorship, is advancing with their military technologies, and we have difficulty keeping up with some of those advances. We're having problems in Korea. Is there an answer that would help unify North and South Korea? Then let's look at the growing deficits. There's something like $21.9 trillion in the national deficits. And if you look at our gross national product, that is what we produce in the year, it's less than that. It's only about $20.8 trillion. And then as a result of this, we have debt, government debt, and we owe China, for example, $418 billion to China. That's not a sound thing. We have trade deficits, why we're not producing as effectively as we might. And then the student debt, it's incredible. We have $1.6 trillion in student debt. Well, is there a way in which if we corrected things in the economic system, are there changes where students would not have to pay go into debt to become educated? And we do have, under what we call the Just Third Way, some solutions, which we can discuss. And then what's happening, obviously, in the world of production is that we're capable of producing more and more, but robots are doing much of the work. Artificial intelligence is doing work that human beings used to do. And so is there a way in which we can turn these energy slaves, in a fossil-free environment, to be able to do work, but is there a way in which those displaced can own the robots and provide and receive an income as owners? So what does the Just Third Way tell us on what we could do to solve these problems? And in discussing that, I like to quote from Buckminster Fuller, who I consider one of the giants of the 20th century. And Bucky said, we are called to be architects of the future, not its victims. And that our challenge is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time, with spontaneous cooperation and without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. Why is that so important? Well, it's important because the two primary systems or paradigms, political paradigms that determine how the systems are constructed, bring about injustice. Whether you're talking about monopoly capitalism on the one hand for those on the right, or you're looking at socialism or collectivism for those on the left. Both, when we talk about the first, it means that a market system, the money system, is controlling who owns, and you have that tremendous concentration of power among a very tiny fraction of the population. So let's look at the problems. What can be done to solve these problems? Well, we first have to know that these problems result from the present system, the laws and institutions which are structured to concentrate power and opportunities in the hands of the few. We have new capital is being added at trillions of dollars, $3 trillion in the last quarter of 2018. That's about $10,000 per citizen. And you see, if that's being added, who's going to own the new capital formation? Is it automatically going to be owned by the giants, or could it be owned by everyone? So we look at the laws and see that the laws are unjust, particularly the monetary laws. And it's important to understand what money is. Money is not a commodity. It's a yardstick for measuring any kind of transaction. When you want to buy something, money is there, and it's supposed to be something that people can understand. But it isn't today, because nothing stands behind the U.S. currency but government debt. And as I pointed out, that debt keeps rising and rising. And we're instead of being able to tax enough to pay the cost of government each year for whatever, for Social Security, Medicare, we're finding that it's going to be very difficult to make those payments in the future. So we're going to have to change the most important is the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve was designed to create money for growth. And it could be designed so that it could be owned, so that every citizen, every child, every woman, every man could get an equal amount of capital credit every year. And that would be significant if we could do that. But you also have to change your tax system so that instead of following Karl Marx and have a graduated and progressive income tax, instead of that, we can have a flat rate tax. But first of all, we have to exempt the incomes of the very poor. They need everything they have, so we want to exempt that. And we're going to still need over time, for a period of time, you're going to need welfare and Social Security and Medicare. But I'm going to show you that if we enable everyone to get just $10,000 a year, every child from the time of, let's say, from the first few months of their life, but every woman, every man would have another source. Every teacher would have another source. Every government worker would have. They wouldn't go on strike in Los Angeles if, in fact, their retirement needs were being met, and if they can get an income from ownership. So that is something that could be done. And under a new tax system, you'd exempt, let's say, the first, you could say for a family of four, $60,000 or something like that, and you'd pay no tax below that, because then your first $60,000 for that family would be exempt from taxes, all taxes, but after that, every dollar after that would be paid at the same rate to balance the budget and even begin to pay down that debt of the past. That's not good. It's not good government. It's not good economics. And the tax, as I say, a flat rate tax would eliminate these growing deficits, which are making us weaker and weaker in the world, and we're not meeting our growth needs. We could grow at very much faster growth rates if we began to meet both sides of the economic equation. You have to have a new way of getting income that's not dependent on the wage system, which I call the wage slave system. But it would enable everyone to get increasing amount of their income from ownership of capital, and that would mean that if we look at a child by the age 18, they would get about $18,000, and that would mean the average person, $18,000 of income per year at age 18. and they would have acquired about 190,000 in capital by age 18. By age 65, they'd not need Social Security because they would be getting something like 88,700. All these things can be found on the CESJ website at www.cesj.org. And so we have to understand words. We have to understand that most people don't understand what property is. A property isn't the thing you own. It's your rights and powers, particularly the right of control and the right to the fruits of what you own. We have a way, and money, as I say, is only the right system. Bucky Fuller gave us some ideas on how we could have a money that's measured in the a kilowatt hour, setting up a grid throughout the country so everyone has access to a newly formed money. So we have to know that the law has to provide equal opportunity for every person to participate, both as a worker and as an owner in the economy. And we've designed something we call the Capital Homestead Act, and again, the details of which you can get by going to our website. Even going to our website, you should just spend, in the beginning, maybe just watch the 40-second slideshow at the top. That'll give you an idea what the big picture is, and then you'll see the Welcome Center and videos, and you'll begin to see what we've done and what Ronald Reagan was a supporter, Senator Russell Long. So you had both parties supporting it. Hubert Humphrey was a supporter of these ideas. You'll see a 60-minute show with Louis Kelso, whose ideas we're discussing today. So you want to know that you can change the system if you have a plan to do it. And we have to find new leadership, open-minded leadership. And one of the things I would ask anybody who looks into this and thinks that it's good, and there are people around the world who've studied our ideas. There are free downloadable books, there are articles, as I said, videos, etc., that you can encourage every student, every teacher, every government worker, every unemployed person, the poorest of the poor will understand these words: own, or you're going to be owned. If you want power, you must become an owner. So the underlying point of this presentation, of my presentation, and the ideas of CESJ around the world is to teach a new paradigm. And we got to get the teachers to begin doing that. So with that in mind, I look forward to people hearing this, to be free to be in touch with all of us at CESJ. They can do that by calling our telephone number at 703-243-5155 or going to the website. That's a very important way of studying, finding out. You can spend years with all the material we have there, but on the other hand, if you could spend in the beginning a few minutes, and then when you have more time, go more thoroughly, and then encourage others to go to our website, which we call our global library. There's so much in it that it could that students from all over the world can take advantage of that. Now let me talk about one of the things that can be done is to mobilize the people power necessary to change the system. Now, Martin Luther King gave you the answer. He called it a peaceful people power. People power organized, where if we ever had, we've had demonstrations at the Federal Reserve, and because we think you focus on the money, you'll be able to solve the problem. But the real problem is that the leaders today are all over the lot. None of them offer a way in which you can make the system more just, not just for the few, but for every person. every person. That's what justice is all about. So we see the present leaders, but I remember in 1980, I think it was in the early 80s, I met with George McGovern, who formerly ran for president, lost, but he listened. We met, we spent about an hour together, he listened, and he sent me a letter and said if he were running for president today, he would do much in terms of promoting the just third way and the capital homesteading. He liked it. He could understand it. And as I said, if you go to our video, you're going to find that Ronald Reagan. So you get people on both parties. But today, I don't see a leader. And what can be done by the people is to begin to find new leaders who you present to them the just third way and capital homesteading and say to them they must be able to answer you. Why do you not support this? What's wrong with this? And if they need help, we will help anyone. As a matter of fact, if they go to our website, they can also find something on the Unite America Party, which is a new party, and it has a platform which talks about domestic reforms as well as reforms in global policy. So find a leader. We need a leader, and at this point, instead of getting leaders who hate, who talk to only a fraction of people, no, get the leaders who will bring about unity among all Americans, because it will benefit every American, and let them tell you what's wrong with it, because I don't think they can. So thank you again for the opportunity of listening. I hope we're making sense to you. The just third way is the alternative to all forms of capitalism and all forms of socialism. Thank you.
You can join CESJ by going to CESJ.org and clicking on participate, and you can become a paying member for $25 per year. And also a student membership is $15 per year, and that qualifies you for discounts on our materials, such as books, which you can buy many of and distribute to your friends and family. And also, if you'd like to participate and comment on the podcast, feel free to call. I have a voicemail set up. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'll play it on the podcast. The number is 678-719-2840. Own or be owned.